introduction to one of my favorite people on earth, Mr. Stephen Oliver, who is with the Advisor Marketing Podcast. Now, Stephen is a true maverick, and I mean that in every sense of the word. Not only in our business, but I have to tell you, his clients universally love him, and they grow at rates that they wouldn't believe it's possible. Now, on this podcast, in each episode, Stephen is joined by various members of his team or special guests to share insider secrets to rapid growth and high net profits in your financial advisory practice. So I just want you to know you're in for a wild ride, new information, and a lot of exciting new future because of Stephen Oliver.
Hi there, Stephen Oliver again, and I am joined by Mindi, Godfrey, and both of Advisor Wealth Mastery. And what we wanted to talk about today is live event promotion, getting good results from live events. And Mindi, by the way, I have heard, you probably heard this more than I have. You talk to more humans than I do, since you seem to like them better. But we were talking with a small group of advisors just yesterday, and what came out of one of the women's mouth was, well, doing live events, doing lunch meetings, dinner meetings, and so forth is dated. That was 20 years ago, and in her case, she's in the San Francisco Bay Area. So, in our area, that's not something that people would do anymore, or something to that effect. I forget what her objection was. And I was talking to another advisor just a week or so ago, and a very high producer. I mean, he's 450 million assets under management, has grown quite a team underneath him, one thing or another. And basically he said the same thing. I don't like doing live events. It costs too much to fill the room, and one thing or another. And as you've probably noticed, when people say that, I tend to annoy them, because the first thing I ask is, well, how did you run it? What was the content? What was the conversion rate? Who did you get in the room? Right. Simple little questions like, did you have the right people in the room to begin with? And did you convert a high percentage of them? And how much were they worth? But let's talk about that. You have been, more than anybody I can think of in or outside of the advisor industry, and me to a lesser extent, but we have promoted just pardon my language, a shit ton of events. You've been involved with a lot more that are in the all the way up to it's an outdoor concert, big live Christian events, and down to more like what an advisor would be, a lunch, dinner, boardroom type of thing. And in my other life with the martial arts schools, I promoted a ton of those. We're at 107 or so forth intramural tournaments that are now at anywhere from 500 to 1,500 participants and spectators, but also an awful lot of events out to the public, with anywhere from 15 people for something specialized up to thousands of people, filling, in one case, the Paramount Theater here, which seats, I believe, 2,800 people. Which was a very expensive production, by the way. I'll never do that one again. We had the laser cannon up on the thing, and we had a video truck outside, and we had a 5-camera shoot, including one that swept down over the stage. And I thought it was really cool until I saw the bill, and decided not to do that one again.
Yeah, production can be really, really fun, but it's really pricey.
Yeah. And there are times and places for that with this business, right? There's nothing better than to put a perfect webinar in the can, or to put even better, the event where you're on stage and it looks real professional, and you get that in the can, and then you have a tool, right? And I'm big on tools. It certainly facilitates the sales process, and as you grow, it supports your staff, who may or may not be as competent, probably less competent than you are in the sales process. But let's start with, you were talking before we hit record here about kind of the 3 ways that you look at an event when you're running one for somebody or helping them set one up. Talk about that for a little bit, and let's hone in for advisors.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's really 3 major components anytime you're going to run any size of event. It doesn't matter whether it's the boutique, event for 15 people or it's a music festival for 30,000. It's going to be the same three components. And the first part is going to be your logistics, your time, your date, your place, your location, all of those sorts of logistical pieces. The second component is going to be your content. What are you offering? And then the third piece is going to be who's coming to the party. And it's really easy to get caught up on parts 1 and 2 and just get people in the door and not be so concerned as to whether or not they're the right people that are coming in the door, that they're going to be the ones who come and enjoy the event. It's a good match between the content and the audience. And the other part of that is once they're at the event, you really want to make sure you have a great follow-up system, because if you've got them there and they enjoy the event, you're creating a customer and you're starting a relationship. But you don't just let that walk out the door when they take the event home and go home with a nice memory. You want to continue that relationship beyond that, especially when we're talking about this kind of world of it being an event to introduce yourself to prospective clients.
Yeah. And probably we should start at the first piece of it. And the 800-pound gorilla, I mean, everybody's doing it. I pull direct mail pieces all the time from all over the country, as you know. One we use, Who's Mailing Water Something. There's a big service where you can get the, Fisher's control pieces and all the way down to what anybody's mailing in fairly large numbers around the country. But one of the standards is, you got the picture of Ruth Chris. We were looking at one in Illinois that had, really nice looking, I mean, made me salivate, but a beautiful picture of a steak in some Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
And we might want to start there is, there's this, I find it interesting looking at all the other industries that we've worked with. And a really good friend of mine fills his very high-end med spa with live events. Another one fills his very, 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 very expensive plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery business with live events. And of course, a ton of people we know fill their practice totally or in part with live events. But in all of those other industries, lawyers, cosmetic surgeons, med spas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they don't use bait in the door that is separate from and different from what the intended outcome for the participant is. And I had, and I've been doing it for a long time, but before I started working with advisors who did a lot of live events, I'd never heard the term plate lickers before. And I found it really interesting. And you get that in other businesses, go to the martial arts schools and they do a live event and they'll give out free uniforms, which cost them like $15. It's nothing. But then they'll get mad because people came in just to get a free pair of pajamas. And it's the same warped, weird, bizarre thinking in that case. But one of the things that I always have to do is wonder first whether the bait should be directly tied to what the client is going to get from you rather than something unrelated. And certainly, if you want to fill the room with a bunch of retirees who want a free dinner, that's fine. But I don't see a direct correlation between somebody who's bored, who wants to go out for a steak dinner and is perhaps too cheap to buy it for themselves. And, Mindi, you've been in my neighborhood. I mean, it's yes. I get solicited, and unfortunately, I guess I'm in the right age range too for them. I have to pause and think about that. But I'm certainly in the right income range and I'm in the right neighborhood and everything else. So I get inundated with this stuff. But you know me,
right?
I'm not going to go chew up 2 hours of my time as somebody who owns whatever it is, however you count it, 4 or 5 different businesses, and in the income range that I'm in because I get a free steak, right?
Right.
And so part of the bait to get them in the room has to be decided based upon who it is that you're trying to get in the room, and recognize that if I wanted to be C-suite executives in the tech industry, or if I wanted to be the C-suite in Fortune 500, well, they're not showing up for a dinner, because you gave them a $50 steak or something like that. It's just it's too out of balance with the value of their time, how busy they are, and and what their interests are. Now, none of that is to say that offering them the beautiful, I wish I had it here on my desk, I didn't think about it, offering them the beautiful picture of you get to come out and hang out with us and have this steak dinner. I mean, that obviously works, and it works for a lot of advisors. But what I don't hear, even the ones who have done well, talking about is the marketing numbers, and the marketing numbers are super important, right? Is
Absolutely.
to start with, what's the lifetime value of a new client?
Yep.
And with any given group of people I'm going to put in the room, what's my conversion rate for them to a new client, right?
Right.
Then I have to step back and say, what's the cost of running the event, and what's the cost of putting the people in the room, right?
Right.
And let's say that, just to use numbers, let's say it cost me $1,000 to get a new client, and that client was going to pay me $5,000 for 20 years. So they've got $100,000 lifetime value, first year value of $5,000, maybe initially to me they're worth $2,000 or $3,000. And it cost me $1,000, including buying the steak and filling the room and everything to get them. Well, how often would I do that? What's my return on investment on that?
Right.
I mean, I do that. I'd be out, running up the credit cards to put as many damn people in the room as possible, because, and to me, what's interesting, and I've had this talk now with several other people who are quote unquote coaches or consultants, and, to the industry, a couple who are really sharp, and a couple who, probably think like the normal advisor does, which is not a criticism, other than they're horrible at marketing, but presumably good at supporting their clients. But, I could talk all day long to an advisor about somebody puts in 10,000 a year and they get a 7%, 9%, 12% return on their investment, and it's going to grow compounded, and they understand those numbers. But then if I say, you're going to spend $10,000 to get somebody to pay you this year $5,000. I mean, you're going to spend $1,000 to get somebody to give you this year $5,000, and start talking about a 500% return first year, and then what that extrapolates out over, including time value money. They get glossy-eyed, shocked, and appalled that I would suggest they spend that much money, because of course referrals are free.
Right.
Now, that was a mouthful, but
yeah,
you know where I'm going with that. So,
oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, again, it's, you get what you pay for.
Oh yeah.
And you can definitely get a ton of free referrals that may or may not be fabulous. But if if you're going to approach it through an event, you can really target your marketing for that event and create that content that's appealing to that audience, so that you're getting your ideal client in the room. And then once you've got them in the room, it really becomes this is the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I think to keep in mind with this, is that when you're doing these kinds of events, not everybody who walks in the room is going to be ready to buy that day.
Right.
But they are somebody who's in the market. And so that's where you absolutely want to keep communicating with them. You absolutely want to stay on their radar. It's the thank you note after the event. Thanks so much for coming out. Let me send you this free book. Let me send you this report, as I think of you over the next few months. And so you are really developing that relationship and launching into this, what will be a highly profitable, even if it wasn't that first day.
Yeah. Well, I did years of NLP training, and, lived, ate, and breathed everything from NLP comprehensive to Tony Robbins and Bandler Grinder and all that stuff. And, we would get the 5-finger pointers out and say, one of them is always, anytime somebody says always, they're wrong. Right. And, there's all these fluffiness in language, but I'll use, an error from that world is nobody follows up very well or adequately. And I have yet to see anyone who's a financial advisor well, do the kind of follow-up that we do, and I'm not happy with our follow-up, to tell you the truth. I mean,
Right.
we're gonna add a ton of steps. But one example was I was talking to a very smart guy, and he was starting to get the habit of direct response marketing and so forth. And he said, well, yeah, I sat down, I wrote 29 very personal emails, and it's very, very conversational and one thing or another. It's like, great. So you get the idea that, it has to be person to person, not person to group. And it can't be coming from a corporate face. It's got to be coming from an individual, and it's got to be conversational. And I said, out of curiosity, after day 29, what do you do? He goes, oh, we throw them away because obviously they're not interested. No,
Oh.
no, you never throw them away. They aren't interested today. Doesn't mean they're not going to be interested in October. Doesn't mean they're not going to be interested in January. And one of the best marketers of all time. In fact, that movie Mad Men on Madison Avenue was in part based upon Ogilvy, and he called it the moving parade of humanity. He said, right, you're not advertising to a standing army, you're moving to advertising to a moving parade of humanity. And what he meant by that was people who are perfect clients for you are getting married, they're getting divorced, they're retiring, they're coming out of retirement, they're having financial mishaps, they're having inheritances, and you can go through the list, right? They're having parent diagnosed with Alzheimer's. There's all kinds of reasons why somebody who might be really interested is a perfect prospect, why they don't respond to you right now, right? And there's all kinds of reasons why maybe something changes in their life. My friend Dan Kennedy, he has a story about when he got divorced the first time. And he says, all these furniture people and everything, new inserts in the newspaper, and they were mailing to me. And I got a house, and I got a house full of furniture. I don't need furniture. And he said, one day I came home, and, the wife had loaded all the furniture up in a truck unannounced and left nothing but the cat. All of a sudden on that day, he needs furniture. So the next person in the mailbox, with a furniture ad, got him, right? But the guy who said, well, I mailed him 3 times, he's not interested, obviously he missed that moving parade of humanity concept. But cycling back on live events, what we can certainly be talking about, because all the principles are the same. We could be talking about doing a live Zoom meeting. So, and I saw, which again puzzles me, the level of, I had this conversation with Dan Kennedy and Jay Abraham, the level of marketing sophistication among financial advisors, life agents, et cetera, is just scary bad, right? But if you're doing steak dinners and that's working for you, and then COVID hits and none of the restaurants will let you do a live in-person event, you shift to Zoom. We did that with Mindi, 150 people, and it was just fine. You do a registration form, they show up live. We had it down where, we're trying to get groups of like 15 or 20 and then doing breakout rooms and breaking them out, talking to them individually, making an appointment, coming back in the next one, pulling them out into a separate room, just like pulling somebody in the hallway. And if you were there if you're there by yourself, we had some where I just talked to people individually and said, here's my calendar for the next week. Do you want Tuesday at this time or this time? And just went through the list, and they were all registered, so I knew who they were. And same process we would do essentially if everybody's sitting around eating a steak dinner or not. But if everybody was live in the room, we just shifted it to Zoom. And we could have a debate for another time. Canned webinar, live meeting, get it perfect and replay, pretend it's live, all of that. I think you can never replace being live, because now I can ask somebody questions and I can get them to engage, and I can, make an appointment right then and there.
Well, and again, going to, live, the big thing about that is, well, the canned webinars and everything are great, and they're useful for on demand. People can watch them at 2 a.m. if they want. Good luck with that. Mm-hmm. But the live is, again, it comes back to that personal relationship, and financial advising is a personal relationship at its core. And so that's where, start as you mean to go on. So if you want to engage with them personally, if you want to have that relationship and have the kind of relationship where they think of you as top of mind and as a friend who will give you referrals of the kind of clients that you want without you having to go ask, then you've got to start it as a personal relationship. And so
Right.
it needs to be that live and personal from the get-go.
Yeah, well, in live, either by Zoom or comparable,
Right.
or live in a room.
Right.
And again, as an aside, I don't understand why financial advisors think they have to draw a 3-mile radius around their office and focus on their own neighborhood. We have people we're working with all over the world. And now you get into licensing and one thing or another, but if you're, it's relatively easy in all areas to be in any state. You have
Right.
to file your insurance paperwork or, whatever you have to do at a certain point. But, we, the top people that we're working with, they have, from California to Vermont to Florida to Seattle, and oftentimes, to Toronto and Vancouver or whatever it might be, or, across the provinces in Canada. And that's where, again, determining the reach and what the target is going to determine whether people are going to drive across, town and sit
Right.
in a steak dinner, or they're going to be on live interactive by video or webinar. And there's nothing to say you can't do both, right?
Right.
So, I could have every Saturday or Sunday.
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
I have a radio show, and that drives them every week to an evening meeting. And I could have Facebook, LinkedIn, Google pay-per-click, search, podcasts. I could have all that stuff driving people from all over the world, or at least all over the US. And the principles are the same, right? So it's all about getting in front of the right people, ignoring the wrong ones. And I'm not talking about anything but they fit your profile customer, right? And then the second element is figuring out whether that ideal profile customer, if I'm marketing to, cosmetic surgeons, for instance, if I'm going to be the advisor that specializes in cosmetic surgeons, well, I probably, I want to hit all of them in my local area, but I want to make that, roll that out regionally and nationally. I think that, what also is strange about that, there's the old proverb, you're never a prophet in your own land. And, the expert from, Poughkeepsie, to pick a, not very interesting place. If you're from Poughkeepsie, I'm not trying to insult it, but, or Cleveland, but the expert from Cleveland, if you live in Nashville, is more interesting than the guy who has an office down the street, just because they're the outside expert and the expert in the field. So this idea of drawing a radius as an advisor, I mean, another good friend of mine, through Dan Kennedy in this case, he sells people apartment complexes. He does multi-unit. Grant Cardone does that too. But he's in Ohio, very stable market, and basically sells people. Do you want to 25% or 50% or 100% of this project? He's got clients all over the world, and they're buying these properties sight unseen. And he's got a very clear format for here's what it is, and here's what the pro forma looks like, and here's a photo, and here's what the demographics and demographic projections of the area look like, and he never has to meet with them face to face. If they want to fly to Ohio, not sure why they would, but if they want to fly to Ohio, then they can go look at it. I'm insulting a lot of people, aren't I, today? Poughkeepsie and I've been,
Cleveland, Ohio, you're just expanding the list.
yeah.
Although,
I've been in Cleveland a lot because again, Dan, lives in God, what's the name of the suburb? It'll come to me in a second. He's right down the street from Northfield Track, where he raced. Funny as hell, 6'3" guy, 220 pounds, riding a little cart behind a horse. I always expect to see the little jockey in these, huge. But the reality is in live events, you got to decide whether it's going to be online, offline. You've got to decide what the bait is, and let's circle back to what's the aha obvious is the lowest hanging fruit is to host events for your clients to come and bring their friends. And across all different businesses, but certainly it's true in this one, is when you're expecting referrals and hoping for referrals, what most people do is they think they like me, I do a great service, and they're gonna tell all their friends.
yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, if you're meeting with them live once or twice a month and dropping them a birthday card, you're not top of mind ever. Maybe you're top of mind the day after you met, but the rest of the time you're not top of mind. And in addition to that, most of the people who work for you, if you have a staff, they suck at the elevator pitch, or Chet Holmes just calls the stadium pitch. They suck at selling your services. So how would you expect, 57-year-old retired executive to be great at selling what your capabilities are, or in fact, even knowing what your capabilities are to their buddy when they're on the golf course, or their friend when they're, having lunch at the local restaurant or whatever it might be. But what we have found across all businesses, certainly this one, is the easiest way to do live events is to have it in the boardroom, have it on video, have it in a relatively inexpensive venue, but have it be where your clients bring their friends on a targeted topic, right? So that's the starting point. Now, that's not going to be 40,000 people in an amphitheater.
No.
But if I have a client base of 100 and I manage to every month get 15 people in who are referred leads, who are coming in to meet in the conference room, that I'm not spending a fortune in direct mail because I'm promoting it only to my clients, and I'm not spending a fortune in buying steak dinners and all that crap that goes with a dinner meeting. And in many cases, you already have a office space where you can facilitate. If not, you can go down. I've got a hotel down the street here that we use a lot. In fact, we've got a restaurant across the street here called El Rancho, and they've got a wonderful meeting room, and we can serve food, but it's relatively inexpensive. And the bait isn't the food; it's is to come meet. And I have you've been there, Mindi, down in Golden.
Yeah.
2 really nice little quaint hotels, and they have meeting rooms. They have one that we can set up for 20, 25 people. They have another we can set up for 50 or 75 people. And we can set it up like a boardroom, or we can set it up, on round tables, whatever. But see, that's the easiest starting point, right? If you want to get, to me, the easiest place to get referrals is you have either online or offline events on targeted topics that would be of interest to their friends, preferably with free report, book, one thing or another that ties to it, that they can then invite their friends to come down and join you, that there's a registration process that's simple and easy that they can bring their friends down to, and do it, once or twice a month. But doesn't have to be complicated, because each topic you format and you prep it. And, in many cases, if you're, with Mass Mutual or Northwest Mutual or something, they have all this stuff done for you. You can just use their PowerPoints and go with it. Now the sales, content of some of that stuff done by the big companies were written by 5 lawyers and 3 other compliance people, and nobody with a sales background was in the room. So you've got to be aware of that.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, as you're talking about, when you're having these kinds of boutique events and inviting, 15 people into the room, you really can focus then on what your content is and what you're going to share, but then adding the dessert board or the charcuterie board, having those nice little wine bar, those kinds of amenities, plus up your event. Because at that point, you're building your event around the content and the relationship, and then anything else extra is going to be a sample of how you're going to care for them, a sample of how that relationship again is going to be. And so then it makes it much easier to really focus on the most important thing, the people in the room and the content. And then too, the other thing we haven't really talked about is once you have a pattern that works, then you can really create your checklist, create your process, and then it just becomes systematized. So it makes it very easy to repeat.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
you
yeah.
can really spend the energy on the people in the room.
Yeah. The biggest events that I've run over the years is just pull out the Excel spreadsheet and you've got the checklist and you end up with a checklist by date. So we need these supplies, we need this thing, this supplier, this thing. Here's when the marketing goes out. Same piece, I mean, very little of it you have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
It's like I was talking to our client, Peter, and we were, first thing I said, where do most of your clients come from? And he said, referrals. Okay, great. I said, well, have you ever done client appreciation events or any kind of client events in order to drive referrals? He goes, oh yeah, I have a friend who has an art gallery. He had this great event at the art gallery and I got, I forget the number, but a good number. He was really excited about the number of new clients he got from it, as well as just the relationship build for the existing clients, most of whom had brought friends. And I said, great. How often do you do that? He goes, well, I did it once. Well, okay. When did you do it? Oh, that was 7 years ago. What?
Right.
No, we either do it quarterly or we do it semi-annually or we do it monthly or we do it bi-month. Once you got the format that works, he goes, yeah, but that was a lot of work. I said, no, all of these things are a lot of work the first time, the
Exactly.
Second time it's half as much work. The third time it's, it's relatively brain dead. Right. And
Right.
Mindi, me, I mean, it was, the third time we did it, it was always handed off. And it's like, we're going to have a little meeting once a week to make sure the checklist has been done. But other than that, I don't need to be involved with anything other than, hand me the mic when I'm on. Because ultimately, as the advisor, you want to shift yourself into the talent,
Exactly.
not the worker bee, right? And the more of the worker bee stuff you have to do, the harder it is to be the talent when the stage lights come up. I worked a lot with Tony Robbins, and he's very, very aware of that. There's a whole team making sure that everything's going, and if everything, if it's not all perfect, he gets very angry. Aside from what he says about things, he gets. I was in an elevator with him one time while he's yelling at his stage manager, and he's pretty intimidating. He's like 6'3", 6'4",
Yeah.
with the finger in the guy's chest, who was like 5'9". It was fun to watch, with my martial arts background. And by the way, by that time, he was already a black belt with my instructor with June Ree. So you had a 6 foot, whatever he is, huge, rather exuberant guy yelling at this guy, with spit coming out of his mouth about, it was entertaining. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is you have to end up being the talent. But again, let's cycle back to the low-hanging fruit is do events for your clients to bring their friends to,
Yes.
with targeted enough topics that you can rotate through a list of 3 or 6 or 9, whatever it might be. And then on each particular topic, depending on what it is, do it quarterly or do it a couple times a year or whatever, and then rotate through.
Yep.
So when we do live events like that, we'll have, here's our list of topics. And in many cases, we're doing it twice a year. And so we have, let's say it's monthly event, but we're going to do this topic. And then we get to month 6, we just start over. And it rotates forever. And then once you've gotten the first one, perfected, you just keep rotating them. And by the way, they bring a friend on a topic they're interested in. You don't need the bait to be, we're doing it at Ruth Chris. You don't need it to be that you're sending them a picture of a steak or whatever it might be. The reason they're coming is their friend asked. They already have trust in their friend has trust in you, and it's a topic that they're interested in, or they wouldn't be there. And
Right.
and so that, I think that's an important consideration that people miss a lot of times, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things too, when you really have good content, you know, that is going to make it so much easier, just on all the things.
Yeah.
And there's universal topics of interest. I mean, there's always going to be somebody out there who's trying to figure out to pay for their kid to go to medical school. There's always going to be somebody out there looking for help with their 401k when they change jobs. Whatever it is, I mean, there's topics that are very universal and they're perennial. So
How not to run out of money in retirement.
yeah,
You know, how to think about all the new crap coming out, you know,
exactly.
blockchain, Bitcoin, you know, Doge, you know, whatever, all of that stuff. You know, especially anytime there's something, you know, when we're recording this, you know, you got the Afghanistan thing going on. A year ago, you had the market crash. Any of those types of things is reason for throwing a topic in,
Yep.
especially the market is soaring, the market is crashing, you know, the tech imploded, tech is going crazy, you know, oil imploded, oil is going crazy. I mean, you know, you think about the sector specific stuff, all of that is natural for it to be a topic. Most of it has to be, you're looking at, again, steal from an old, you know, long dead copywriter, John E. Kennedy. You want to get inside the conversation already going on in their mind.
Yes.
And that becomes the headline, and that becomes the offer for what the event is. Now, let's start talking about content. Here's, again, I'll steal from Dan Kennedy, is he says in any sales situation, which is what this is,
Right.
you want to teach them what they need to do, but not at all how to do it. Right? So if somebody leaves the room thinking they can do it on their own, and by the way, financial advisors are horrible about this. I got to tell you, accountants, lawyers, you know, they're all horrible about this. They think, well, if I don't give them real meat, if I don't really teach them, you know, all of this stuff, they're going to feel like they were cheated. Well, no, the idea is for them to see that there's something they need to do that they hadn't thought about, and
Right.
that you know enough about it, you can do it for them. And by the way, the ones who are in the demographic that you really want, you know, the ones that have huge assets, they have huge income, they're the ones that, you know, they know what their time's worth. They want to find somebody they trust for that person to do it. They don't want to be, you know, give me 3 books and 15 CDs and 5 webinars, and you're going to teach me how to do it myself. No, that's not, you know, where it's at. It's, they want somebody who's going to, you know, do it.
Yep.
That they trust, that they know is going to be capable. And that's where the content has to start, right? It has to be, you know, Walt Disney said, I'd rather have a training session and first priority is that they were entertained, than that they learned something. And if they're not entertained, they're not going to learn anything. And if it's dry and you make sure that it's really content laden, is they leave unimpressed and they leave bored. And also it's hard to keep their attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, you know, this is something where you don't want to get real technical. You want to stay focused on the broad strokes.
Yeah.
On all of these things, because again, the goal isn't just to have them in the room today, it's to get them in as a client. And so when you're talking in broad strokes, that gives them the understanding that you know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But to get specific to their situation, that becomes the perfect thing of, oh yeah, I can totally help you with that. Let's go ahead and set a time for us to meet, and then we can talk on your specific situation. And it helps that natural progression of the relationship.
Well, and again, financial advisors are really bad and about using jargon, right?
Yes.
And, you know, abbreviations, internal language, all of that kind of stuff. And in that environment, the last thing you want to do is use jargon. It's something that I have beat to death, as you know, being one of the BTs from time to time, beat to death with my staff of, you know, our internal language never exits the room. And in fact, for staff training, we try to always use words.
He It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
With the staff that we want them to use with the client, because
Right.
otherwise they take our internal jargon and use it with them. So what you want to do is you want to use simple, plain English or Spanish, or if you have a different audience, whatever they speak, but you don't want jargon. You don't
Right.
want industry insider language. You don't want to be talking about IRS. I mean, you can be talking about the way that you deal with this type of situation with taxes, but you start getting into all the specifics on the details. One is you confuse them, and I have and this comes back to the one-on-one sales as well. A confused prospect never buys.
Right.
If you're in front of somebody, and whether it's in a live event or whether it's in a one-on-one setting, and they say, "Oh, I really need to go digest that, go through my notes, think about that." Well, that means you confused them.
Yeah.
Right? Gave them too much information, gave them too detailed of information, asked them to digest too many pieces of data. I mean, the old studies used to be, that's why telephone numbers were 7 digits or then 9 digits, is they thought that was the most people can keep in their mind. Turns out not to be particularly accurate, but it's a good way to think about it.
Right.
There's only a certain number of things that they're going to be able to keep in their mind at any one time.
Well, I have a theology background, and one of the rules of thumb in that is
That master's in divinity is really relevant to.
Yeah, it comes up in other areas of my life, but it's the 3-point sermon.
Yes.
It's that you give them 3 things and you give them a mnemonic to remember it, and again, that is keeping it simple and relatable and enough to go home and think about and talk about over lunch after church or synagogue, and but not so much that you're overwhelmed with it.
Right.
And I think that really holds true in this kind of situation. You want to give them something to go, so that they do go, oh yeah, I need this person to help me unravel this.
Yeah.
But not so much that they're like, okay, now I need an aspirin and a translator for my notes.
Yeah. In fact, one of the great direct mail pieces we were talking about, in fact, yesterday, is a mailing with a packet of aspirin, or a mailing in looks like an aspirin bottle, with the will eliminate all of your headaches. Yeah, you don't want to cause headaches. You want to eliminate their headaches, and you want them to see that far from them having to study and get confused, you're just going to handle it. And you're going to handle it in a way that they're not confused, and it's straightforward, and it's simple, right?
Right.
And we got about 6 minutes left, and we barely scratched the surface. But and we'll follow up, and we'll do another one with going beyond this with the events.
Right.
I will say, what has happened in marketing is people think that everything has gone online, and I'm overgeneralizing, but they get so fixated on LinkedIn, Facebook, whatnot, that they think any and everything they do, that's the only way you market. And what we know about a live event, whether it's a webinar or whether it's an in-person, steak dinner, or whether it's a meeting in a smaller, big venue, is you can't scale doing just online marketing for something that's geographically targeted, right? So it's very difficult if I'm in, the suburbs of, Evergreen, Lakewood, Colorado, the Central West, where I'm at right now. It's very difficult to get a lot of people to respond if all of your media is trying to do TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, which is 800-pound gorilla, and LinkedIn. What you have to do is you have to overlay it with a lot of other media, mostly direct mail, which is again why I like starting with, let's get all of our clients to bring let's get a third of our clients to each bring on average 1.2 friends. And so now we've got, a nice group of people because the marketing cost is minimal. We're just doing direct mail, calls, email, text to our client list, not to, the whole broad audience out here. But as we go through it, the figuring out how to get every cosmetic surgeon in a 5-state region, or figuring out how to get everybody from 55 to 65 who has $500,000 and up in investable assets, who happen to be in a quadrant of town. The principles are the same, right? And if I'm looking at the tighter I am geographically, the more I have to not rely on online media, and the more I have to rely on physical, direct mail packages, et cetera, to get people in the room. And it's extremely important to have started at the end and know lifetime value, first year value, immediate value, how much it costs to put them in the seat, what your conversion rate is from they're in the seat, either on video or in person.
Right.
And we'd be remiss in not talking about, before we finish, we'll do a couple more to talk about put them in a steak dinner meeting, or put them into a bigger meeting with not a referral market. But we'd be remiss in not talking about how you convert them to clients.
Right.
And and we see this range, right? We see the range of complete ineptitude. So I get 40 people in the room. I give them a handout of some sort, staple my business card to it, and says, if this sounds interesting, you need some help, give me a call.
No,
but
no.
Complete disaster.
Absolutely.
Not that you won't get a few,
right?
But your conversion rate
could have.
Yeah, your conversion rate is going to be pitiful. And the second one we've already talked about is assuming that if we didn't get them today, we're not going to get them in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18. Heck, right. we just did a mail-in. We have people coming back, after 4 or 5 years. So what you want to do, though, in the room, again, depending upon how it's done, if I'm doing a registration for a webinar, if I'm doing a registration for a live event, my mission is always to have an appointment for the next step before that event happens, right? So we're bringing them to a video meeting. In the preparation for the video meeting is scheduling them for a follow-up appointment following the video meeting. If we're bringing them to a conference room, we want to schedule them for the follow-up meeting prior to the meeting in the conference room. Now, it seems really difficult to get most advisors in their office to, one, get that through their head that is doable, but number two, to do it, right?
Right.
And so if you can't do that, or if you haven't done that with some percentage of them, and we can talk about how to get it to happen, detail wise.
Right.
But at the very least, I want, when they show up and they check in, that's the point at which we're scheduling the next follow-up. And what people think is, well, they have to hear my glorious presentation before they know if they want to work with me. No. And in fact, your presentation is probably not all that glorious. Truth be told.
Yeah.
We can work on making that better. But what we want to do is we want to have the follow-up step happen before that happens. So best case, it's as soon as you get the information that they've raised their hand that they're coming, you then schedule a follow-up appointment. And by the way, you have to work really hard to get them to show up too. People miss that point. A webinar show rate tends to be maybe 30-40%, right? A live meeting show rate might be better than that, but it's not going to be, if you don't do a lot of follow-up steps and they get text reminders and they get a piece of mail in the mail as a reminder and they get a phone call, they're not going to be there. But then what we want to do is get the appointment ahead of the event, or worst case, get the appointment when they check into the event. Now, if you're doing it by video, having a mechanism to do that is takes a little bit more sophistication. If we're
Right.
meeting in a boardroom, we're meeting at a restaurant, we're meeting at a hotel, meeting room is pretty simple. I mean, literally, you when you do the setup, you say, I want 3 tables here, and I want them not to be able to get in the room without going through the table. And here's the little maze, and they have to go here and check in, schedule the next appointment ahead of time. And
Right.
it's a very, it's like a very complicated script, right? Is one of the things we do is we do a thorough evaluation and give you personalized feedback because everybody's situation is different. I wanted to set a follow-up for maybe a 30-minute session, either by video or in person, following the meeting. And we have this time on this day, this time at this day, which one of them works better. And an awful lot of them say, well, I got to go check with my wife, my husband, which is a different
Right.
topic about having them both there. I got to go check my calendar. They're going to have some version of the same excuse, which I got to go look first before I tell you. And very complicated script. Well, let's pencil a time in tentatively. As you can tell, we're going to be pretty hectic in the next week or two. I want to make sure we really look at your needs specifically. When do you think tentatively would be work? We'll pencil it in. And if that doesn't work, you'll have our email address, phone number, everything. And then they start looking at it and they say, well, I know that Monday's bad. My wife works Tuesday night and I work during the day. Do you have anything Wednesday or Thursday? Oh yeah, we could have, this time on Wednesday, this time on Thursday. How does that work? Well, I'm pretty sure we can do Thursday. Let's go ahead and put that down, right? Then I give them, maybe a couple of books and a packet, whatever it might be. But I'm writing down it's going to be Thursday, and here's all of our contact information. And by the way, you have your mobile here. Let me share our contact record with you so you'll have it in your phone, because that's another thing. People don't answer phone calls from
Numbers, yeah.
numbers not in their cell phone. And it's a real simple process, right? Now, compare that to I gave the world's best presentation. They had a handout on the way in the door, and I say, go over there and see Mary if you want to schedule a time to get together one-on-one.
Yeah.
I
And if
can,
there's any bottleneck at all, you'll get the first 5 people scheduled, and then everybody else is going, oh, I don't want to wait for that, and peace out.
right. Well, and here's the thing: what they think what they're thinking is, yeah, that'd be really good. I'll give them a call tomorrow and schedule it.
Right.
In fact, a lot of times you already said, or you can give us, big mistake. But they're thinking, we'll give them a call, we'll email them, we'll follow up tomorrow. And we know psychologically, frankly, the minute they walk through the door, they've forgotten about you. But certainly tomorrow, after the crises of life and the kid got a bloody nose or whatever, and the, grandma's in the hospital, they've forgotten about you. So you've got to get the appointment ahead of time. And as you know, I like to work with a team. So I much prefer that if I'm going to be the talent, I've got people working the room, and I can have somebody pulling them out and having a conversation and pre-qualifying in one thing or another. Plus, as you know, I don't like to talk to anybody who's not completely qualified. So usually there's a couple steps they have to go through before they even get to me in this case. But, we're over our time, and we barely scratched the surface. But what would you add to that, Mindy? And we'll call it a day for now.
Yeah, I think it's always going to begin with the ending in mind when it comes to this. So the goal isn't to have a great event. You want to. The goal is to create a new client. And so it's what are the things that lead to that moment, and then anything else is superfluous.
Yeah. And literally everything else is superfluous, right?
Right.
What I want the event to do is create an appointment for which they're likely to show up with warm feelings about it.
Exactly.
And then I want it to be when they show up, they're predisposed, they're both qualified and they're predisposed to buy. And a lot of the supplement through the process is supported with tools.
Right.
Your book, collateral materials, shock and awe box or whatever you want to call it, big packet of information. Follow up FedEx in the mail, $100 bill letter, dollar bill letter, whatever it might be. but we want it to be the entire purpose of the event is to create a client. And the step we have to get to before that is to make an appointment for which they're likely to show up. Because a poorly trained staff member can get, they can get 100% conversion to appointment, but then, people just kind of feel steamrollered and they don't show up. So you've got to make sure the script and the follow process is smooth. And then we want to make sure we use the various tools and so forth, so they show up both to the live event, but then also show up to the appointment with a high level of credibility. So you're the expert on the pedestal rather than you're just some guy trying to pitch them something.
Exactly. That's a great summary.
Yeah. And whereas, as usual, 10 minutes over what we had planned to do, but and we got, as usual, 10% into the way into the topic.
Right.
But, I might just re-summarize with, if you haven't done live events before, start with the marketing math, know what the lifetime value, the first year value, and so forth. And then that tells you how much you can spend to put the butt in the seat, virtually or live. And then the other piece is the low hanging fruit, assuming you have a decent client base, is the low hanging fruit is do a variety of topics for your existing clients where they're invited to bring their friends, encouraged to bring their friends, and so forth. And then we move backwards from there of everybody in your prospect database should be getting an invitation to all of those things. So anybody you've talked to in the last year or 2 years, everybody who's on your email list, everybody who's on your phone list to get an invitation. And then we can move backwards and, look at maybe people who raise their hand that you've never communicated with before. And then we can move backwards to inviting the broader public. But even with that, we want to be very, very specific on who's going to get in the room, who it is we're inviting, and so forth. But that's a starting point. And then we'll talk next time about using a broader direct mail strategy, using a broader cold strategy of how to get people who probably haven't heard of you into a room and how to deal with that next time.
Sounds great.
Thank you. And I'll remind everybody, if you go to advisorwealthmastery.com, we have our package of information. So you'll get a couple of books from me, a book from Lee Meltier, who's one of our team, and then a free book on, or not free report on social media marketing, a free report on practice building necessities and so forth. So invite you to do that, and we'll hopefully talk soon.